Today, we're going to generate a bunch of random points. We're going to use two different methods. The best method is to go to random.org, and they have different ways of generating lots of random things, including random numbers. We'll generate decimal fractions. We decide how many we're going to generate. We generate them. The numbers will come in columns, but we want to use them as points, so we'll have to do some reformatting. I already did that before, and here are our random points. Okay, now we want to see what these random points look like, so well, we know how to draw. Let's make a function, draw point. So we can make a circle. We can fill it with red and move it into the right position. And then we can plot all of these points. We can do that with list.map, mapping the draw point function over all of those points. Okay, and that's what we get. So looks like 1 point. Well, those decimal fractions are all, so that's no good. So we know that our screen is 128 units high, so let's generate it again. Okay, there are random numbers, but we're only using a quarter of our display, of our draw region, so let's offset by half of the height, and there are random points. Now, what if we wanted to see the points, the ordering of the points? Well, if we want to see the ordering of the points, we could make an animation. So to see the animation, we'll take a certain number of points from the list. And how many? Well, we'll use time. So we could just do that, but we're going to get an error. So the error is a bit tricky. What's the difference? So this is the type that it's getting in the game app, in the code that is, we can't see, but it has the init, it has the update, and it has the view, which we build from my shapes. And this is what it was expecting and what doesn't match. Actually, I don't see anything that doesn't match. Oh, okay, what doesn't match is the message type. And that isn't really the problem. Well, I don't understand how that becomes the problem. So the problem is that time is a floating point number with fraction, and we can only take an integer number of points from our list. Okay. So we're adding points. If that's a little bit too slow, we can speed it up. Oh, now it's doing 3 at a time. So it'd be better if we multiply before rounding. Now we're getting 3 per second rather than 3 every second. We're getting 3 in a third of a second. Now these are really random numbers. Real random numbers, they do clump together in a way that many people would say doesn't look random. But if they're really evenly spread, that isn't random. Okay. Sometimes though, when we're drawing, we really need them to look more random than really random numbers. So how could we generate numbers that look more random? Well, let's start with, okay, so we're going to make some numbers that are not random. So first of all, there's 100 points there. So 1 to 100, I can generate that with list.range. And if I want them to be floating point numbers, I can map them all to floating point numbers. Now, our first not random numbers we could take. We'll map a function. Let's just call it f, or function fun. So it would be really not random if we just map our points, map our indexes. Let's call this index to the x and y positions. Okay. Oops. And we're going to display not random. Not random. Oh, and so we have to divide this now by 128 to get numbers that stay between 0 and 1. Okay, so here are our numbers. That's not very random. The next thing we can try we could take sine and cosine, those numbers. Let's speed this up a bit. So we're getting numbers that are going to go around a circle. Now, we didn't really need to divide by 128. In fact, that's counterproductive. Okay, so now look, we're getting numbers that are kind of random. At first, they look more random, and then you realize that they're actually always on this piece of the circle. So we can try to improve on that. So one way we can improve on it is we'll change, if instead of going around the circle at the same speed, we had two circles, we were going around the two circles at different speeds, and we got the x coordinate from one and the y coordinate from another. So what's our other speed going to be? Let's say our other speed is 51. Then we get numbers which do look a lot more random. Now, to be comparable to our original random numbers, we need them not to go from -1 to +1, but from 0 to 1. We'll just fix that. So there are our random numbers. So these may even look a bit more random. And we could make this really unrandom if we did something like put a factor of pi. Okay, because sine is a periodic function. So the key is that we basically have a factor of 1 over pi in here, because we know it has a period, it has a time of repeat of 2 pi. So we can change this and choose another number, and so now when we look at it, we see it does look pretty random. The order of appearance, it looks pretty random, except that there are too many numbers around the edges. And that's because sine and cosine, that's because if we look at something that's going around and around a circle, well, if we divide that circle up into quarters from the top to the bottom, it spends a lot more time in the top and bottom quarters than in the middle quarters. And if we divide it up into smaller pieces, we see that gets even worse and worse. So that's why we see a clumping of points around the edge. Now we could make that invisible by letting some of our points be off of the edge. That would be one way of doing it. Now the clumping is gone. Or we could do it by taking a square root . What that does, it will move all the points a little bit towards the middle. Well, actually, that doesn't work very well. So let's go back to what it was. Okay, now to see how that compares, we're going to draw both the random and the not really random numbers together, but this time We want to have different colors, so we need to tell Drawpoint which colors to use. So we have to tell it color as an argument. Oh, but when we do it this way, we're getting points, the red points, which are outside. So just to make them comparable, then the same number of points in the same box. There you see the differences in random numbers. So if you need random numbers in your game, this is a way that you can generate random numbers. And you can look for this code at random not random in the game examples.